Going to God's country. We were going to God's country, 1890, with a hustle and a bustle to get things ready. With 5 little children and the oldest only 10 years old, and getting food and clothing for a long journey, we could do that job very well, for we did not realize what we were getting into. We had some cousins that had gone 2 years before to the Indian Territory way down in what is called the Fleetwood Farms in the Chickasaw Nation. It is part of Oklahoma now, and that is where we were going. It is pretty hard to part with some things of our lives. We didn't have much, but we worked hard for everything we had. You had to work hard in the rocky country of Missouri. I was glad to be leaving it. We are going to God's country. Tough Missouri. Old Missouri was, after all, a pretty tough place. I hated to leave it, though it was all I knew. But we were going to God's country. We were going to a new land and get rich. Then we could have a real home of our own. But we didn't know what was ahead of us. We all drive in. We were all tired from the long, wearisome trip, and it seemed that every river we crossed was up. Our first was Sauk. The next bad river was the Arkansas. Next was the Cimarron. And then the North Canadian, and the South Canadian, hundreds of others it seemed. We went through part of Missouri, Kansas, Osage Nation, Pawnee Nation, Old Oklahoma proper, Chickasaw Nation, and then we landed in the Fleetwood Farms. It was on the Red River, just across from Texas. And there we were with our cousins, and was ever so happy. We all drove in this lot with 700 covered wagons, and so tired from 33 days' drive. But at last we were in God's country. We sleep with centipedes. The dugout was so full of centipedes that we had to sleep with a butcher knife under our pillows so we could have something to protect ourselves. Sleeping with the butcher knives under our pillows at night to kill the centipedes in our half dugout was existing. The dugout was made of logs with mud between them, so we'd want to put out the lights of our nights and centipedes would go running through the cracks. Then we would whack them into pieces. Some nights we would kill as many as 20. The next morning, first thing we would do to move our beds and sweep the dead ones out. But that was pioneering in God's country. We count blessings. We thought it was indeed God's country. We had worked hard for 11 years in Missouri and left there with $800 and a team and wagons. After we paid for picking and renting all the expenses, we had $820 left. And besides, we had our corn in our garden truck. And our garden was the best garden that we ever had. It seemed like every seed came up, and how the garden did grow. We had onions, tomatoes, cabbages, peas, beans, potatoes, peppers, lettuce, parsnips, muskmelons, watermelons, and everything in that line. People came from all around to see that garden. When we came, we went to Henrietta for groceries, but this time it was for barrels. I made 1 barrel of ketchup and a barrel of sauerkraut. But many things happened while we were living in the small lease, many hardships along with the pioneering. But we tried to overlook all, for everything was so different and new to us with heaps of existence. And besides, we were in God's country, sowing wheat. We picked cotton this fall, and October came and it was getting time for the wheat sowing. So we was wheat drill to buy, and that was $85 more than the cotton had gone. So that was that. It seemed like we never looked ahead until we had some of the implements to work with. Then it was another long trip to the railroad, but that was done with good grace. We were in God's country. But at last we had a drill to sow the wheat. Back in Missouri, we would sow by hand, and you would put a peck of wheat in the sack and swing it across your shoulder. Then you would take out a handful and sling it around. You could sow about 10 feet at once. You would have to walk around the field until you got it all done, then harrow the ground with cover the wheat. The harrow was made of tying some brush together with a chain, fastening a brush with a double tree. Then 2 single trees was fastened to a double tree, and the horses fastened to them. And that was the way it was done for a good many years. But in God's country, we had a drill to sow the wheat. The prairie fire. In 1892, the prairie grass was most as high as our covered wagon. One day, by some means, a fire got started. We never knew how anyway it was existing. You could see the blaze leap. It looked like it was 50 feet in the air. We had burned a very small patch around our house, perhaps 1 acre. We had just built us a shed for the teams and chicken house for the cowboy. Our horses were tied up in the shed, and the fire was coming so fast that we could not tell whether we would have time to get them out or what to do. It looked like our horses and our milk cows and our family, too, would go up in flames. We did manage to get the teams and harness out of the shed and close the house, but the fire was getting very close. Just about half a mile away, our church, and we were so frightened. The little children crying and screaming at the horses snorting, and I was praying and working too. We had a well that we had just dug in front of the house. We had to draw the water up by hand in a bucket, with drawing water so that we might be able to save our house and children. The fire was getting pretty close, and we could see the jackrabbits, prairie dogs, prairie chickens, coyotes, and all kinds of birds and antlers running in front of the fire. While we were watching the animals and the birds, I had every available thing of water that I had drawn from the well. We could hear the fire roaring and see the flames leaping. We were all covered with burning grass. We put the 6 little children in the house and fastened the door into one window. While we were standing in front of the hut watching the fire, I just happened to turn my head to get some bursts of grass out of my eyes, and I thought I could see the moving objects coming from the north. I wiped my eyes again and looked. Then I said to my husband, "Look, there's something coming from the north." He wiped his eyes and looked. It looked like a herd of stampeded cattle. And if it was that, we were goners, for they was coming towards us. We watched for a moment, and there was smoky and burned much grass flying in the air, for the fire was coming from the south and was blowing very hard, and we couldn't see. All that we could do was stand there and wait. There we were, we thought, between 2 fires. We could plainly see the fire coming from the southwest. My husband said if it was a stampede of herd of cattle, that we were in for something. I might ask him why we hadn't better go into the house with the children, and he said that it might not, that he would watch. But I never did go in. Just about the time I wiped my eyes again, I could see that it wasn't cattle, but we couldn't make out just what it was. It looked like men the best we could see through all that smoke. We just stood and looked, and I told my husband perhaps the Indians on the warpath. He said it might be, but he did not think so. But I do believe he thought it was Indians, for he turned white. So white that I could see he was scared. So was I. The fire coming one way, and the Indians are stampeding cattle the other. We just stood there and most petrified for a few seconds, and then I could see that it was all men. But what kind of men? Cowboys or Indians? But all at once, men whooped ahead of the rest, and then I felt like it was the cowboys. And sure enough, he just come up charging in and felt some relief, but I was shaking so that I could hardly stand on my feet, and so I was my husband. The 6 little children in the house got over being scared and were just playing. When they opened the door, they looked so surprised to see so many cowboys. They never said a word, but just looked amazed. Cowboys saved the day. Then the boys in the roof Benton had sent them. You could see that the fire thought he might be in danger. Some of his cattle might be too. All the water I drawed out of the well was used for when the cowboys got there and got off their horses, dropped their bridle reins, and went up to the shed, and gathered up all the old feed sacks, and 2 of them picked up the water and walked to the edge of the high grass. Then all they did was wet the feed sacks and began to set the grass afire, but did not tell us what they were doing. We soon found out. They were backfiring. Backfiring works. They burned up all of the past the shed and then let it burn out quite a ways, but they would whip it out in the wet sacks. So when the fire got the burned grass, it would stop. They had a very hard time of it because the wind was so strong and they was burning against the wind. They worked almost all that night, and when they began, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. About 6 o'clock, my husband said that we would give them something to eat. I tried to get them something nice to eat, but it was a hard job, for most everything we had in the house was black with burnt grass. But anyway, I made some biscuit and some coffee. They ate and drank coffee, but they told my husband they wouldn't stay until I was out of danger. Later, we made some more coffee and some more biscuit. By that time, I'd gotten some of the burnt grass washed off of the thing so we could cook some food. When my husband took the food to them the second time, they told us to go to bed and rest, for we had gone through some experience. And they was right, too, for we had. I washed the little folks the best that I could and put them to bed. And of course, they thought it was funny to have the burnt black grass all over them with rag dolls. Finally, we did try to sleep, and I did not sleep very much, and it was early next morning. I wanted to see how things looked. It all looked black. Cowboys were gone and the fire was all out, but everything did look so queer. We looked around and fed little folks and went back to work on a clean house. Everything was so black we had to wash all our bedding and everything that we had, and wash the house outside and inside. We worked all day, and then the children's heads and my own head was to wash. It was a long time before I could get all the black off things. Is this God's country or not? Just a few days we noticed a buzzard sailing over where the fire had burned, so we hitched a team to the wagon and piled the children in and drove over the prairie. We were surprised to see some dead rabbits and snakes and all kinds of birds. When the wind blew from the south, we could smell something burn like burnt hair. Well, it wasn't long until we came a big rain and helped to wash out black things, and pretty soon the grass came up so green and everything did look so beautiful. Before long, it covered the cattle. For several days of hard work, I got everyone cleaned up and the house cleaned too. While I was doing that, H went to the railroad and bought some more fence posts and hired men back then with him. Hired men had gone to visit some. He said that he was sorry that he had missed all the fun. I told him it wasn't much fun, but that he could have had fun setting the fence posts back where the fire had burned them. They went to work and it took several days. We finally got everything in shape again, but I never looked over the prairie that way, but what I could imagine I could see smoke. It took me a long time to get it. In fact, I never did, and it makes my flesh creep today when I think about how terrible fire and smoke. I said to myself, is this God's country or not? I didn't talk about it to my husband, so we just kept saying, go on for everything will be okay. But sometimes I almost gave up. Then something kept saying, it must be God's country. Go on. Rock bottom. As time went on, everything went to rock bottom. Wheat, corn, cotton, hogs, cattle, and everything. One of the men that was in the drunken spree was wanting to go back to Texas. He had been raising quite a lot of corn and fed a bunch of hogs, and that was very nice. He could not sell them on the market, for there wasn't any market. So he came to our place and wanted us to buy them. We told him that we could not handle them either, for the weather was too warm to butcher. He just stayed and talked and cussed country, and finally he said that he would buy them if he could have them for $1 a head. We didn't know what to do with them, so finally said that we'd take them if he would bring them over. He said that he had his wagon in the shop and he was getting ready for leave the dang country. Well, I told him, this is God's country, but he said, it's a hell of a country. He was one of them good Methodists, but he did get drunk and got in jail. Foster was his name. Anyway, we felt sorry for him, so we told him that we would take the hogs and we would come that evening when it got cool to get them. We got a top on the wagon and went to get the hogs. They were nice young hogs and very fat. He put his dog in a pen to help us catch them. One of the hogs got too hot and keeled over, so H just cut his throat. One of the hogs dead out of the whole batch wasn't so bad. We got the rest loaded and put the dead one on top with planks. Now we got to keep the hogs from jumping out. We gave Foster $8 and went home. We heated some water and cleaned the dead one and put the others in the pen. We worked most of the night before we got our work done. The next day I worked all day frying the meat down with big stone jars. It was lovely meat, too. The Texan man was ready to go back to Texas, and we never did see him again. But we hope he got his good back to good old Texas. Things just wasn't bedrock, but we stayed and fought it out and came out of the right in the end. But it was a tough go. We raised 35 bales of cotton that year and sold 3 bales early and had the rest ginned and hauled home. We piled it in the yard until the next spring, and then we sold it for 3.5 cents a pound. It did not even pay for the picking. But you're in God's country, or so they said. A sandstorm. The very day that the school was out, we had the worst sandstorm. It came up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was so bad that we could not see 50 yards. We went in the house and closed all the doors and windows. But that did not make any difference. The house was just made of boxing. And the sand came through the cracks, everything was covered. We had to sit and take it. We could not cook nor do anything but try to keep the children from choking to death. There was 2 hired men at the time of my brother and 9 of our family, so there was, we all sat in the sand pouring in. No supper. We could not cook or even get milk out the cows. It lasted 18 hours. We just had to sit. Besides the sand blowing, it was an electric storm. Everything was so full of electricity that we could not touch anything. If you touched anything, the fire would make it fly and you struck like a match. The sun was shining, but the air was full of electricity. Abe Gunn, the hired man, came in from the field and threw his lines on the fence, and electricity flew down the fence. Children would get drinks of water so they could slide the tin cup over the stove and see the sparks fly. And the electricity killed streaks and wheat and oats. Some places in the fields for 50 feet looked like a fire had run out, and they was all dead. They never did grow anymore, and there were streaks that were all over the whole country. We estimated that 1/5 of our crops was killed. We sure wondered if that was God's country. Well, the next morning, first thing was to dig out the sand from the house. We moved everything outside and swept it the best we could, and we tried to even cook some breakfast. Everything was so gritty we could hardly eat. Most of our groceries were ruined, so everyone else in the sandstorm all over the country where the land was plowed. The house was cleaned as best we could, and the cows milked and breakfast over. Everyone went to work. We was ever blue and homesick. But our cousin, Joe Parker, came up to cheer us up. He said it was one of the worst storms he'd ever saw. I laughed and said that I thought so, for it was God's country. He did not like it. He said that he was sorry for me and that I'd worked so hard and had been such a good sport about everything, but he thought everything would be all right. Then in a few days we had a good rain. Things began to look pretty good. We felt better, but we did not have a very good crop. Wheat was short, corn not very good, cotton pretty fair. The price of cotton was down. It looked like we were going back to where we started from in '91. One thing, we had a big lease of 4 crops, so we tried to console ourselves and look forward to better times. Had God forsake us? It was July 1895, and I commenced to wonder if God had forsaken this country. Crops was bad, and almost all our money was gone, and all those teams to feed. Corn all burned, and 500 acres of wheat, and not one fine grain cut. It was all too short, just a very few oats. The cotton was about a foot high, and the jackrabbits cleaned it up. We had about 50 acres of cotton, but it did not last long when the jackrabbits set to it. And it looked like the grass was going to dry up too. No gardens, no feed for our hogs, no feed for our children. And our credit was good, so we still got goods. Post office was still going. Not pay much, but we got canceled. That wasn't very much for everybody. It was too poor to buy stamps. Then we had a big rain that pepped things up. We'd make some hay and have some feed and grass and green up so our cows could give some milk. We plowed some ground and went to town and bought a bushel of black-eyed peas and planted them. We planted a new garden of most everything. Our neighbors laughed at us. But when fall came, they did not laugh. So did H. laugh when I told him that I was going to plant a garden. I said, "Why are we not even in God's country?" So he didn't say any more. He helped me plant the garden, and we had a nice garden with lots of black-eyed peas. I sold most of them. Everybody in the neighborhood who did not leave the country went to plow, turning under wheat land, and we did not make anything. A lot of people left. Some left in the night and took all their belongings, and some things that did not belong to them. They had bought plows and the implements, and my husband had gone to their notes, so that they left us to pay for their things, and nothing to pay with. We went to Brian and told the merchants what would happen, so they went, "Well, H., you go and put in your crop, and we will carry you over and let you have money to buy your seed." They bought a carload of seed wheat and a carload of oats seed. The merchants let everybody have seed. But most of them had to give a mortgage on their teams and implements. They said that they would trust us. I felt like we were favored. And we was, too. Perhaps the Cheyenne and Arapaho is God's country. We were still working on, but all the time wishing that we could really have a home. We were not afraid of work, but it seemed that just when you thought you had something, it would burn up and rain so much that everything would be ruined. The children were growing up, and we knew that they must get a home. So we went up to the town of Gary. We looked around and saw some nice places for sale. We made a deal for one claim, and that would be 160 acres. Another claim must be relinquished. The men relinquished, and H. filed for 80 acres. We paid the man $300 for his claim. I had the money in gold. We had sold part of our cattle for $20 a head, and when I made a little sack and fastened it under my skirt band. When I gave him the $300 in gold, the man's eyes got as big as a hen egg. He was so scared that he jumped on his horse and started for El Reno. We told him that it was 30 miles and the bank would be closed. But he said that if he couldn't get into the bank, he would hide until morning. If people knew that he had that much money, he would be robbed of the money. We put up the money for the other farm and the Bank of El Reno. We had to write to Washington and prove up on it, so it took quite a while. We got what was called a patent from the government. That 160 acres cost us about $700 and another 80 in 300. It was beautiful land in the valley of the south side of the North Canadian River. We had made up about our minds that the Chickasaw Nation wasn't God's country, but we had hopes of finding this new territory. So we started back home, or what we called home. It was our 7-year home and 5 of what we lived in. We thought we would stay one more year and sell our box houses. We kept building one most every year for the family grew till we had 5 little box houses, the store and post office combined, and a little blacksmith shop and chicken houses. Those we would move if we wished to. All we had to leave was 4 wire fences. We had sold all our milk cows and got money for the 2 farms. I told my husband that something would have to be done. I couldn't go out and round up one like I did in the 90s. He laughed and said, "Wasn't them good old days?" I told him he might think so, but I didn't. Then he joked to me and said that I was a young rebel girl that debated the question that pursuit is better than possession. Yes, I told him that I still believe the pursuit is better, that I was still a pursuit of a home that we had talked about. That I did not believe that I could have fought the snakes, centipedes, coyotes, and all the rest of the varmints and lived like we did if I already had a home. And I was still thinking pursuit was better than possession. He laughed and said, "You are a queer woman, but one won't stay with." But anyway, we knew that we had something about some milk cows. Looking ahead, this new God's country was much further north than we would camp out while we were building. One thing was that we had a lumber yard in Geary, the place where we were going, and it wouldn't be so far to haul lumber. Our new place was just 4 miles from Geary. We had been going so much further than 4 miles, it would just be in that place. We sold our building to Charlie Willis, the man that had worked for us for 4 years. He bought all our improvements and was going to run the farm. When it came time for us to move, I felt like I wanted to stay, for we had lots of excitement and lots of fun, lots of hardships too, and lots of hard work. But it was all over now. We did like pioneering very much, for you get something out of it. We had not found God's country, but we were sure we would find it in our new home in Cheyenne country. So again, we were on our way. We were going to God's country. The wind and cluster. We were going to build a 2-story house, but everyone said that it was too high. So we built a 1.5. We wanted to plaster. Nope, as the people said, the wind will shatter the plaster off. So we just sealed the paper. But that was my mistake. The people did not know that they were talking about, for we built 2-story homes and plastered too. But later, I think it's not paid to take everyone's advice. Just do what you want to. But anyway, we built, and it was the show house of the whole country. You could see it for miles. At last, we're in God's country. We sell again. We stayed about 4 years, and then one day a man came to our place looking for a home. Ours being the best improved and best looking farm, he wanted to know what we would take for the place. Well, I said, I won't sell, for I'm tired of moving. Then H said that he would sell if he would give his price, and that was $6,500. The man said that he would take it if we would wait for part of the money. We said that we guessed we could, and we sold. Another house, another baby. Then it was looked about for some place to live. We had to give possession in May, so we moved to a small house again and looked for another place. On August 24th, 1901, we were still living in the little house, and we had another baby. We called her Daisy Lincoln. H was still looking for a better place to live. There was much talk in the cattle country coming in for settlement. That was a good place to settle if you had the right farms. Some places were bad, so H went to El Reno to register. When you registered, you would get the numbers in a sealed envelope. Then you would have to go locate the land. He registered, but he never drew a big place. We finally bought a lovely place just south of our old place. It was a new place and beautiful place, but again, it was too small, so we had to build a big kitchen 20 feet long and 18 feet wide, and a big back porch. It was a lovely place with all kinds of fruits and berries, apricots, all kinds of breadfruit, and all kinds of ornamented trees, so we could work very happily with such a lovely home. And we thought that for sure we would be there for life. We were sure that we had landed in God's country. For almost sure. Another baby. In 1904, there was another baby girl, Lily, on hand. This was our 12th child. She was born in November, so work was slacked up for some time. We bought some Texas land. We heard of good land that was selling around Vernon, Texas, so we decided that we would go to Texas and see. We thought that we were in God's country now and might take a chance on something. We went to Jerry and took all the train to Texas. Of course, we were met by a lot of real estate men. They drove us all over the country. But anyway, we bought 740 acres. We just paid $500 down. We paid $10 per acre. And that was quite a lot of money. We let a man have the place this whole week, but we did not make much. So then did some Gary people laugh and say that we were crazy. We didn't say very much, for we began to think that maybe we had made a mistake. Payday came around and we had to pay $500 in the interest, so that was over $1,000 gone, and no crop. We didn't say much to our neighbors about it. Some of them felt sorry and some of them were tickled. It didn't worry me, for I knew that we had been in so many tight places before, and all we had to do was come right on the end, and I felt that we would this time, and we did. That fall, we got a telegram from the same man that we bought from him the place to get $15 per acre. So we talked it over and sent him a telegram saying $20 an acre and no less. The next day, here come a telegram saying sold. Deeds will follow. We was ever happy. But since then, the land was worth lots of money, so there was producing oil wells all over 700 acres. But you see that one never knows what to do. But we made good, for we cleared $4,000. We thought that was pretty good, and we bought another farm close to us, so we made. We thought that was the easiest money we had ever made, and only $1,000 invested for 8 months. Then we wondered if maybe Texas wasn't God's country. We sell again. It was not long until the man from Kentucky came to our place and wanted to know how much we wanted for our home place. I said that I had wanted to quit moving, but he kept hanging around, so H told him that he would take $10,000. He said sold. I had to have a big cry, for we had bought a lot of new furniture and we also had the other farm. But I didn't say anything. I wondered where we were going to this time. The next thing was to sell the other place and just across the road. That did not take long. We just put up a sign for sale, and in a few days a man from Kansas came by looking for a farm. We sold our farm that we had bought the money that we'd made from Texas to it. We paid $4,000 and sold it for $4,500. Hunting again. So now we were all set for another search for God's country, another wild goose chase. And this time it was Oregon. My father was there, and I had a sister there too, and they had been writing about what wonderful country it was. They wrote that Oregon is really God's country. We had been in the search for God's country ever since we left Missouri, so we decided we would take another chance. We decided that it was on to Oregon, trek across country. That was 1908, and there were 7 children, H and myself. 2 of the boys were in college, one was about 12, 3 little girls, and baby boy Harley. He was born in 1907. The money panic year, and near Oklahoma became a state. We was in a hustle around to get off this time, but we were going to the train and not in covered wagons. I thought it would be much better, and of course it was. We were only 5 days on the train, but believe me, it was some job even with all those little folks. It was a big trek across country, even though, for all, it was on midnight train. We landed in Salem, Oregon about the middle of June. It was so different, but it was lovely country. Somehow, I did not like it, but we thought we would try it. We had to have some place to live and could not find anything to rent that was fit to live in, so we began to look for something to buy. Another home. The real estate men hauled us all over the country in spring wagons, some with tops, some without, and the dust was about 3 inches deep on all the roads. But anyway, we did get to see lots of the country. And it was very beautiful with all the groves of tall fir trees and Royal Lane cherries. Salem was noted for its cherries. We soon found a two-big-story house that belonged to a widow and two girls. They wanted to sell and buy a smaller house. We bought it, and it was more furniture to buy, and it took quite a lot of money. We looked back towards Oklahoma. It was getting fall now, and we began to think on going back to our old stomping ground. We did not like it, Oregon. It was a very good place, but it just wasn't what we thought it would be. I was getting discouraged hunting for God's country. I knew must be such a place, but where? We decided that maybe Oklahoma wasn't so bad. Anyway, we decided to go back. We find God's country. We found just about every kind of person in every part of the country we lived. We worked, made friends, helped out where we could, and usually found that others were willing to help us when we had our troubles. We were commencing to wonder if there was a certain place that was God's country, or if God's country was everywhere, or if God wasn't the country, then what? H and I did a lot of thinking and little talking. We'd been living out on the farm in Woodward County for 3 years when H had stroke paralysis. We moved back to Enid so we could be near the good doctors. He lived for 2 years, then my beloved died. We had spent 48 years together hunting for God's country. Before he died, we learned something terribly important. We learned that God's country isn't in the country, it is in the mind. And we looked back and knew all the time when we was hunting for God's country, we had it. We worked hard, we was loyal, honest, and we was happy. For 48 years, we lived together in God's country.